welcome back to the Heartcore Podcast. I'm Celestina coming at you from Australia. Miko's on the other side of the world coming at you from...
Mallorca.
Ooh,
I had to think there
island.
for a second. Ibiza? Mallorca? Yes, we are now in Mallorca. Hi, everyone.
I love that. Amazing. So, the podcast today, the title may look like one you may have listened to in the past. However, we are digging into... clairvoyance and access to spirituality, and if you can see that in someone's chart. This idea came to me maybe like 3, 4, 5, maybe even 5 weeks ago at this point, but we were on such a roll with the other topic that we'd been on for 3, 4, 5 weeks that we kind of pushed this back, and also I feel like I just needed to do a little bit more research into all of this before we were actually able to present it to you guys. So we are looking at Tyler Henry's chart. If you want to go back and listen to the first episode that we did on him, I think back probably within like the first 10 or 12 episodes that we did on this show, highly recommend, because we looked over his whole chart then. However, today we are going to specifically be focusing on the aspects of his chart that are related to clairvoyance and other clairs of the nature. So that's kind of what we're looking at today, and what gates, what channels specifically are aligned with kind of that connection to the other side and being a bit more open to that connection to the other side. So I'm super stoked on this.
Me too. And yeah, I hadn't heard of Tyler Henry since the first time we covered him, or since you first mentioned him. So for me, I then also didn't really dive deeper into it because we covered 2 different celebrities at that point. This time was the first time I really did a bit of research into him. Also watched a few podcasts that he was on. And he's a very interesting individual. The way he talks, the things that he talks about, the way that he answers questions. It's very interesting.
I feel like he's wiser than his age, and he like holds himself older than he is. He's only 28, but he started doing this probably over a decade ago, and even in his late teens, I feel like he held himself as an older person would. So this is definitely not his first round as a human in human form. So it's really cool to be able to see. It's cool to be able to see that and kind of like pick up on some of those nuances.
Definitely.
All right. So what kind of sparked this interest in this is someone's openness. By that, I mean, does an open or undefined center have anything to do with one's potential connection to the other side or spirituality as a whole? And the very short answer is, yeah, kind of, sort of, but also it's a lot more complicated than that. So we're going to dive into the yeah, kind of, sort of, and then also approach the it's more complicated than that as well. So openness in general, right? Like on someone's chart is like if the center has nothing, no gates, no channels attached to it, no gates pointing towards it, is, I call that like completely open. That is an area where energy can be amplified, and you're also a little bit more vulnerable to take in energy from others around you. So openness, depending on the centers, can create different experiences for the person, right? It can be greater receptivity to energies around you, a little bit more in tuneness with energies around you. It can also allow you to feel into empathy a little bit more, be maybe a bit more intuitive, especially with open head centers. So like the ajna for mental processing, the head for inspiration and ideas, the emotional solar plexus for emotions and feelings, and potentially having heightened awareness of energies from external sources in these areas. It can also lead to greater empathy or greater psychic empathy. We're going to lead more into that in just a bit. You can also have just more connectedness to spiritual experiences with this openness as well. And there can also be challenges with it as well, right? You're figuring out what energy is yours versus the energies that you're feeling from those around you. And especially in Tyler Henry's case, we're going to get more into this, but especially in his case, he's not just feeling the energy of the people physically in the room with him, but also the spirits of those who are connected to the people in the room with him. It can be amazing connections or it can be challenging connections, again, depending on the openness, and not just like the physical center openness, but like the emotional availability of the person who is experiencing these energies. You can choose to listen to them and hear them, and you can also probably choose to ignore them. So that's what I mean by the openness there. While openness can enhance one's sensitivity, defined centers, in addition to the openness in one's chart, can also play a pretty significant spiritual connection. A defined G center, in Tyler's case, he does have a defined G center. It gives a stronger It gives a stronger sense of self and direction, and can potentially create a deeper inner alignment for one's life purpose and higher guidance, and also in that connection with others. While he does have a defined G center, he has an undefined spleen with a lot of action happening in it. So we will touch on that a little bit more. But because he has so many gates in his spleen, he probably does have a bit more connection to the spleen than some of his other open/undefined centers. And that, I think, is more consistent with having an intuitive sense in the moment, having this instinctual awareness, again, in his case, more so for others, and it can be interpreted as kind of this spiritual connection. Any other thoughts on openness versus definition?
Yeah, what you've mentioned regarding the spleen of having intuition for others, that's probably why it's undefined in his case, because if it were defined, the intuition would be more about himself. If it's undefined, if you have an undefined spleen, you can pick up on the well-being of others, which is also going to be interesting later on when we dive into Tyler's chart. Regarding the defined centers, it's more of a consistent energy that you have within your chart, whereas the other centers that are undefined or open, you don't have a consistent energy flow towards. And Celestina already mentioned the other aspect of taking in and amplifying these elements. These are very big lessons in our life. So everywhere where we're undefined, this is where we learn. This is where we kind of quote unquote go to school, as Ra liked to put it. In his chart, we see a few of the open centers, but let's see where you're going with this from here.
I have one more point about the spleen. We're going to dive deeper into it in just a bit, but majority of the gates coming off of his spleen are unconscious. So I think that may also lead into the particular connections that he can make with the other side and with others as well. That's the last little nugget I wanted to drop in there. You added some really solid info about incarnation crosses into our mutual discussion notes, so I'd love for you to dive a little bit deeper into that side of things.
Yeah, after looking at the centers, which we kind of are going to first mention for everyone that isn't watching, which centers are undefined and defined in Tyler Henry's case. We have the undefined head center, we have the undefined ajna, undefined throat, completely open ego, as Celestina already explained what that means, that there are no gates coming out of it. Then we have the undefined spleen, which with quite a bit of action that Celestina also mentioned. And then we have a defined emotional solar plexus, defined root, defined sacral, and defined G center. And both or all four of these centers are actually consciously defined. However, the connection between the sacral and the root is unconsciously defined. There is only the 60th gate that is half conscious, half unconscious, but the whole channel is unconscious in nature. With this unconscious definition between the root and the sacral, he may be feeling like a split definition consciously, Unconsciously, he does feel whole though. So he is a single definition. He is a 3-5 profile, which is also going to be interesting looking at it from the Incarnation cross. And that's what we're going to dive into now very quickly, very short on the surface. But the right angle cross of Maya, which is his cross, is also connected to mysticism in some way. And I thought, just going through it, you can see that he's got the 61st gate in his conscious sun. And he also has the 61st gate in both his conscious and unconscious Neptune. So for me, this element is already hinting towards his capabilities as a medium. He has the Neptune that is about things that are veiled and what is more veiled than the other side. He also talks about it in a very interesting way that he doesn't really have all the answers as to how he can create and establish these connections. He doesn't have all the answers as to what happens after death. He describes it as a space that is neither heaven or hell, that there's a neutral space. But I thought it was very interesting when you want to look at a few of his interviews, the way that he's describing what this gift feels like. And it does feel like a gift to him now. It wasn't necessarily always a gift to him. And you can see that also in the third line, that there was a lot of challenge in his childhood. He had to go through a lot of trial and error. And I also took the liberty to look at some asteroids. And that is also pointing towards a lot of challenges in this aspect. He had to go through a lot of trial and error. He went through a lot of bullying. He wasn't accepted for his gift. So he was in a school, and then he was taken out of the school system and put into homeschooling. But he held on to what he believed in. And he only started to believe in this when he had a premonition, I think it was a dream, of his grandmother dying, his grandmother passing. And he told his mother about it. And that did in fact happen. She had just passed away. And since then, he started to really believe in his gift. And his mother was a very strong supporter and still is to this day an extremely strong supporter of him and his gift. So I find that super sweet that his mom is driving him everywhere. He doesn't drive himself. She takes him to every appointment, and it is also part of his design. He does have the 50th gate in his moon, in his conscious moon, and that is a lot about values. The 50th gate, it's about knowing which things to support and give to the future generation in education forms, like what are the values that they should be learning and implementing, what are the things that they should take forward and bring into their life to create a good future for them. So there is some tribal energy, but he is more of an individual / collective individual. So the 61st gate is connected to these downloads. I think one of the elements that is very important in Tyler Henry's chart is that he's got an undefined head, undefined ajna, and undefined throat, and the 61st gate in his conscious sun, 61.3. So really going through experiences, having trial and errors, and then through that creating his own understanding of the world. And the 61st gate is providing the connection to source, the connection to spirit, along with the undefined head and ajna. And through the undefined throat, he can really speak in the voices of the people that he's talking to or the people that he's channeling, per se. He doesn't really use the exact voices that these individuals had, but he's able to provide the insights that are important for the individual that is listening to him in a logical way as well. So his 62nd gate is in his conscious earth, 62.3, and this provides him a logical way of being able to explain abstract concepts. So that is very important when you're a medium, to be able to express yourself clearly, logically, so that everyone can follow. And then he's got the 32nd gate in his unconscious sun, and that unconsciously pushes him to lead others towards what is valuable and lasting in life and in spirit. And the other part that I found very interesting was the 42nd gate in his unconscious earth, and that is about the ability to help others finish cycles and find closure. And to me, being a medium that mainly talks to people that have passed, that provides these individuals that are still on the planet, provide them with this closure. Yeah, I just find this right angle cross of Maya very, very fitting for him.
I think that was probably like one of the first things when I like started researching his chart, maybe like 2 years ago. That was probably one of the biggest things that stood out to me, was his right angle cross. I was like, wow, man, you are living out your life's purpose. How beautiful is that? It's so cool to see, because he probably doesn't know his design, you know, but like, yeah, he had some challenges, but he's as himself in the design form as he can be, which is really cool to see.
Absolutely. What I also liked when I was looking at his design, or his design in combination with his interviews actually, was that he, with his right angle cross, means that he should be focusing a lot of energy onto himself, as in on his self-development. And that is so crucial for a medium, to stay open-minded, and that's what he's doing. He, of course, has some thoughts and ways of viewing the world, but he's not latching onto those. So he's open, or he seems to be open to shifting his perspective. And as a medium, what is super important is that you have to let go of who you are on one hand. On the other hand, he describes how important it is for him, and also for everyone else, but especially for him, to understand who he is in the first place, in order for him to be able to let it go, which I found also very interesting. And he loves psychology and looking into sciences to then describe, but also to just have ways of understanding the world in many different ways, not just the spiritual realm.
So freaking cool. Okay. So Miko sent me this chart, if you will. We did not design it. I'm not sure where you got it from. If you want to cite that, please do so.
The source is unknown per se, but I do know that when I read through some of the things that Ra said in his lectures, he's referencing it. So maybe someone sat down and connected all of those channels and gates to what Ra had said once, but I'm not sure.
I think it's a super helpful chart. We'll share it on here with you guys as well. But basically, it breaks down the different gates and channels that have connections to like higher intuitive functions, whether that be clairvoyance, claircognizance, something on here called supercognizance, clairaudience, clairsentience, all of the clairs up on here. I kind of broke this down earlier. Tyler Henry doesn't have all of them, doesn't even have 50% of them, but obviously is a pretty successful medium in his own right. We are going to just touch on the channels that he does have and the ones that have significance in his chart, and just explore that a little bit more. He has the 1034 going from his chi center to his sacral center. I was going to say splenic center for a second. His G center to his sacral center. This is the channel of exploration, and it has a powerful, or rather, it is a powerful and individualistic channel. This in particular focuses on self-empowerment, survival, and the embodiment of one's unique expression in the world. And it's about fully being in that present moment, aligned with your sense of purpose and your sense of identity. This, on the chart that Miko shared, it's about, it's connected to concepts like quote unquote super consciousness and the angelic circuit. So the angelic circuit is not like in your typical circuitry, if you will, but And it's also like not really human design like approved, if you will. But for all intents and purposes today, we're just going to go with super consciousness. So essentially, this is referring to a higher state of awareness that goes beyond the self, the ego, where an individual can experience a sense of oneness with the universe, divine insight, or a connection to some type of spiritual truth. And this channel in particular can be connected to super consciousness through several different aspects. So the pure expression of one's self. So from the G center is extremely deeply tied to the essence of oneself. And when paired with gate 34 in the sacral center, you're getting a powerful life-giving energy from the sacral, and that's able to fuel one's self-expression and creating that dynamic where one acts from their true and individual nature. So when one is in alignment, they can feel that elevated consciousness from ordinary survival circumstances and potentially being able to access that higher state of being described as quote unquote super consciousness. Also, being in this present moment, right? That's a lot of what this channel is, being in the moment and accessing the super consciousness from there by being present can help direct experiences for you as life unfolds in front of you. In spiritual practices, this presence, like being one in the moment, can often be the gateway to experiencing oneness or some type of transcendent state, again, associated with super consciousness. And finding that higher alignment in purpose. If you're living through alignment, if you're making decisions in a way that aligns with your strategy, your authority, and you're really feeling into what your energy feels like, you can elevate your state, your alignment, and lead to those moments where you can truly feel guided by something greater. The connection to the angelic circuit, if you will. Similar kind of vibes. So essentially the vibes are transcendence, being in the moment, and trusting in your gut and trusting that connection with yourself in that moment and really being open in that moment to receive. And the culmination of all of this within this channel has the potential of being a super consciousness / angelic connection, if you will, and then allowing that person to be like the facilitator of the information that they're receiving in that moment from somewhere else. Again, it doesn't have to be to the other side. Obviously, in this episode, we're talking about that today, but it can just be the energies that you're feeling from those around you as well. The key qualities of this channel are radical self-trust. So truly listening to that gut, truly listening to the connection and the experiences around you, to kind of have that spiritual awakening, to have that connection so that you can become the vessel for that higher wisdom or divine inspiration, and embodied divinity. Living your truth, living in the moment, and not just living for yourself, but also being as a conduit for those higher tasks. And then lastly, spiritual autonomy. So in this sense, you will no longer need to seek meaning from outside direction. You are the direction, right? You're bringing that spiritual autonomy, and you're able to connect directly with source, with outer realms, with the spiritual other side, whatever you'd like to call that. So some ways to connect with this. I don't know if you're doing this, Tyler, but if you are, we'd love to chat with you. Some meditation, some sacral alignment practices, self-reflection journaling, and also just trust in yourself. I feel like the trust piece comes with time, comes with experimentation, comes from the meditation and the sacral alignment practices, right? The trust just doesn't come overnight, but putting the work in, putting the time in to get to that trust really can solidify this. Not saying that you're going to become a medium, but I think that this is just interesting to look at in comparison to Tyler. Yeah, thoughts. This was a lot.
The thing that stands out here to me is that he seems to, since he was 10, so when he was 10, his grandmother passed away and he had this experience. And so since he was 10, this was something that he had worked on extensively. And he started to believe in it more and more and more, the more that he went on. And he really held on to that. And as I had mentioned in the Incarnation cross already, and I think this is part of the reason why the 3410, because he had the energy to push, to follow his own direction and his own instinct of what is helpful and right for him. So gate 10 is about self-love. It is also about, so it's a gate that in the love gates that we covered, you should check out that episode if that's of interest to you, but it is basically a love that is personal but also interpersonal or transpersonal, so it can be both. What I found very fascinating in his chart was that he has no line 6s. I couldn't find any line 6. There was mainly line 5, line 3s and line 4s. There are some line 1s and line 2s, but there are so many line 3s and so many line 5s. So it's really about going through the process, just being knocked down and getting back up as a line 3, but also about this collective aspect, which is repeated in the line 5 as well, of I can help others, I can network with strangers. And when you're looking at his Netflix series that I haven't seen, I don't know what it's about, but I've just seen or heard in interviews Celestina is saying I really should watch it probably. So good, so good. She's okay, well, I'll check it out when I have Netflix again one day. But I heard that these interviews, or these, not interviews, these connection with the other side meetings with people are being hidden from him, which individual is actually going to be sitting in front of him. So they're giving code names to these famous people most of the time, not always, but most of the time famous. They're changing their houses, their location, just to completely veil who that individual is, so that he's confronted with the situation in the now. And that's where we kind of go back to this channel. 3410, in the now, having the direction in the now, having the insights in the now. Also with the splenic center of being open, being very open to intuitive insights from others. Yeah, and then the downloadable aspect of the head and ajna and throat, just receiving that information from above, from all around him. Very fascinating.
Another note about being in the now. So same Netflix series, when he would drive to go see those people, like his mom was driving him, when he was sitting in the passenger seat as his mom was driving him to go see those people, he'd be like, I'm starting to feel X, Y, and Z. Someone is coming up for me. I'm not sure what this is. And 100% of the time it's related to someone in the room, whether it's like the main person that they're talking to, or like if the main person like has an emotional support friend, like sometimes things will come up for them as well. One time I think something came up for the neighbor, that like they were at the house and like something came up for the neighbor. So it's just like in the vicinity that he's going to. So cool.
Did they go ring the neighbor's doorbell?
They did, yeah.
Oh my god. What did the neighbor say?
So good. So good.
That is super cool. Just imagine Tyler Henry standing in front of you. Hey, I have a message from XYZ.
Dude,
are you willing to listen to it?
So cool.
Are you willing to pay for the call from the,
from the other side?
Facility?
Call collect. Dude, that'd be an expensive ass call.
Oh my god, yeah.
If I was the person on the other side and my family member didn't say yes, I'd be pissed. I'd haunt their ass.
That's so funny.
Would you not?
Especially because, yeah, I guess I would too. Well, maybe I will have I would just be like, okay, I'm above this, literally. No, but what you said about this being an expensive call, I think he's taking $800+ for a session, and he's got a wait list. I saw the last digit of the wait list is 600,000 people on that wait list to get a reading from him. Just imagine. Yeah.
Good for you, buddy. You have an unlimited source of income. Good for you.
And he's so humble about it.
I know.
He's so
It's really sweet.
Grateful and humble, and he understands and respects that this is, I don't know, that it's a gift and that he's working on it every day. I don't think this is something that just comes to him. Well, it did just come to him, but to keep it up, I think there is a lot of work that you need to put into.
Oh, totes.
I think it's just so sweet how humble and appreciative he is of it.
So with that note, let's take a 360. See what I'm doing there? Because channel 3-60. I feel like you really like talking about this one, so I'm going to put this in your lap. 360. Because we also talked about this one in the love episode, if I recall.
Did we?
Perhaps in connections. Maybe we talked about it in a connection chart. All right, so 360 us.
I don't actually like to talk about it much.
Oh no.
It's just that yeah, it's a channel that provides a lot of quick turnarounds in life. And that's again another side to Tyler Henry that you can see where he is open to change and he's open to switching very quickly a perspective, but also a situation. And this channel is a lot about having this inner drive to change something. And that can happen through friction. And he often pushes the limits beyond what is currently acceptable. And you can also see that in his mediumship. I mean, he's gone a path that is very, very unique. And he also says that there is no mentor that you can look at and learn from a lot of times. And he would have wished for an academy to have to kind of learn from individuals who've gone through this. But he noticed that a lot of people that are claiming to be mediums, they're not real mediums. They are kind of semi-real but also semi-fake, and it's very difficult to decipher who is real and who is not, especially for someone who doesn't have such a connection. But he has tried to connect with quite a few of these individuals just to understand more about this, because as I had said earlier, he doesn't understand how it works and he wants to understand more about it. But he can only say that, okay, sometimes it doesn't work. The timing isn't right. The person isn't right. But he tries to always create an atmosphere and a space within himself, but also around him, where he can bring these insights more frequently than not. And that's, again, what I find very interesting in mediums. They really have to release their I, their ego, their definition of themselves in order to take in these informations purely, because as soon as they start to interpret it with their lens, they may ignore symbols that are coming up for them, and they may be like, okay, but what does the 4-leaf clover have to do with anything kind of situation? There was a fireman that he did a reading for, or the fireman was the one that passed away, and the person in front of him wanted to know more, and he saw this 4-leaf clover. And that was one of these readings that was very impactful for him, because he saw the symbol, and when he was talking about it, the other person told him that it was, I don't know if it was a sticker or plaque or what it was, but it had number 1 dad written on it. And to him, it was something that was the only thing that was left over. So it's not a sticker. It was something made out of metal probably, but the fireman died, and this was the only thing that was left over. And it had so much symbol and meaning to him afterwards. But while he was doing the reading, it may not seem like much. It didn't make sense to him. So that's why it's important to just share whatever comes through and keep the channel clean and clear without any of your own thoughts and ideas coming in. And that is super difficult. And I think that is why it's not really that mediums try to not be good, as in it's not that they can't channel, but they are being infiltrated by their ego or their I, and that's where they kind of move into the wrong direction.
And I feel like there's so much pressure to perform when you're doing it for people, like on a stage or on TV, right? I'm sure it still happens, but I've heard recounts of people being like, is there a Philip in the audience, like Philip is coming through, like a name with a P, right? That's performative. But I think you're right. Their ego is definitely getting in the way of the actual message that's coming through, or the messages that could potentially be coming through if they just broke away a little bit, which is why I think the openness in the chart is a huge thing, like in all of this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's where you take in and amplify things, and on the other hand, it's as we said at the beginning, it's also important to understand who you are and what you are in order to then decipher what you are not and who you are not. So, yeah, very interesting. So when it comes to the 360 channel, another part of it is to surrender to the process. And it is really about trusting the timing. In the podcast interview that I watched, the interviewer, also a very good interviewer, and he's only 20. Seriously, these people, 27 or 28 and 20, and I'm like, wow, so successful already, and just fantastic questions. Just like the guy that does the podcast of Diary of a CEO, also a fantastic podcaster and great questions. But this one is called You Can Too, I think. And the last question he asked was, what are you currently trying to release? What conditioning are you currently trying to release? And the answer of Tyler Henry was that he's trying to release the thought or the idea that time has to happen according to his own understanding of it. So that meaning that he needs to learn to accept the timing of the universe, and not that he can force the time when he wants it to happen. And especially with a show like the one that he's doing, I think it's called Life After Death. Is that right? So especially with such a show where he has to have appointments, he goes to these people, there are set times and places to go and to start these downloads. As you had mentioned, the fact that there is this pressure can push you to sometimes just provide information that isn't accurate. I don't think he's doing that anymore. I think he's way beyond that. I don't know if he ever did that, but he's definitely way beyond that. He can just say, hey, okay, I'm not receiving anything right now, and that will just be it. But I think it's that there is this enormous pressure of having to perform at that moment in time. So yeah, it really goes back to meditating and doing these practices to clear his space. He also said that he really needs this downtime, these rituals. He thinks rituals are super important. He does a lot of music with his partner, which I also thought was really beautiful. It's great music. I've only heard a few of them and not very long while preparing for this. But I really like what he's doing. And so he says that connecting with creativity is an important part. Connecting with nature is an immensely important part. And when you're looking at his asteroid, so I looked at a few of his asteroids, but he does have in the 61st gate, which was one of the main interests for me because it's his conscious sun. And the 61st gate is your ability to download. And then you can also, again, look at the other side of the 61st gate along with the other side of the mandala. So there are many ways that you can interpret and look at a chart, but in his 61st gate, he also has Atlantis. And Atlantis is a connection to the other side. So it can be other cultures, like the Atlanteans, for example, other planets, but also in the past and in history to connect with elements in those realms. And it's also connected to crystals. So I took a look at his house. I tried to find out if he's got crystals around. And he does actually have a lot of crystals, a lot of huge crystals around in his house. Did a little bit of stalking there. But I love just when you're looking at the asteroids, how much deeper you can go into this. And another part was Pandora, which is also in the 61st gate, which represents an element of you that you were made to believe is not special. So you are pushed to believing that this is not special, and it actually is very, very special. And yeah, now he believes it, now he understands it, but the bullying shows that this was actually part of his life.
There's something to those asteroids, man. So cool.
Oh, yes. That's really my absolute favorite thing, because you can dive so much deeper and can give so much more targeted advice. Like if this was a client, I would say, okay, surround yourself with crystals if you're not doing that already. One advice. Okay, there are more, but asteroids are really fantastic.
We've gone through his 2 channels that are connected to Claire everything. Now we are going to dive into 4 gates. There are 4 gates that are apparent in his chart that have more of a spiritual connection to the other side. So gates 50 and 18 are both coming out of his splenic center, and these both have a connection to Clairsentience, meaning the ability to receive intuitive information through feeling or sensation. So this is one of the things that he does first when he, like, after he introduces himself to a new client, he'll like take out his notepad and just start scribbling. And it's just lines. Like, it's nothing in particular. It's just lines. But this, I think, is kind of connected to him being able to pick up on energies, pick up on emotions, pick up on subtle vibrations, and lead to that connection with the other side, the other person. He uses the verbiage of it just allows him to kind of like get in the zone. But it really does, which is actually super cool. So gate 50, being the gate of values, again located in the splenic center, is associated with protecting the tribe, taking care of others, responsibility, and having a strong sense of well-being and nurturing for others. And I feel like this very much comes across, again, if you've seen him on, like, what was it called? Living with Tyler Henry? Life with Tyler Henry? Life on the Other Side? What was the name of the show? If you've seen
Life
him...
After Death?
Those words.
I think.
Yeah. If you've seen any of his shows, whether it be Life After Death or any of his previous interviews, there is definitely a nurturing sense that he brings to the interactions that he has with others. So the clairsentient connection in this gate in particular is having an intuition for others. That's kind of the vibe of having an undefined spleen as a whole, but paying attention to the other person that you are energetically connected with. And in this moment, for him, it would be whomever he's reading, right? So whether it be maybe an energetic difference, I've noticed that when he does readings, he'll often have like a visceral, like physical reaction if someone has passed from like a heart condition or a lung related condition or some type of asphyxiation that will physically manifest itself in him, and he's feeling the energy from what that person felt on the other side. And sometimes it's like physically how they died, which is kind of wild. The other gate in the spleen is gate 18, the gate of correction. So this is more associated with critique, needing improvement, and the ability of sensing what is wrong in order to correct it. So even though this gate can come with kind of sensing imbalances and flaws in others, it can also act as a barometer for truth and to find alignment. With the intuitive process, it's less of a sense of doing so for criticism's sake, but more out of finding a deep and intuitive sense that things could potentially be better. So when talking about clairsentience in particular with this, a person who has this gate may walk into a room and may immediately feel like the vibes are off and there's underlying tension within the room. And that could be sensed between the people in the room or kind of just an imbalance in the room's energy as a whole. Hence the need for those crystals. Totally makes sense now. But yeah, so even if there isn't a visible conflict, a person with this can very much feel into what the energy and what the vibes in the room are, and then subsequently what the energy and the vibes are coming from someone on the other side as well. So yeah, this also harks on the tightness in the chest or the feeling of not being able to breathe in related to someone explaining their death or their passing. What an interesting connection to one feel, but also have the need to like write, scribble, have that touch to touch sense that, I mean, he obviously knows that he needs to do as well.
You're right as well with when we're looking at his chart, if you're watching, you can see that in the determination, we have the tone that is 6 touch, but we also have it in the environment that is 6 touch. So touch is very important for this individual. And to have so much activation in an undefined spleen provides many different ways of him to access it through other individuals, through planetary transitions. And this 18th gate, it can be very challenging in relationships because there is this inner need to correct someone all the time. This is literally his close relationships in line 4. So more of a family and friends aspect where this is coming out. The demands of correction and its potential to generate anxiety. The incompetent is the line of the 18th gate, line 4. Difficulties as a result of inadequacy that cannot be resolved because of inadequacies. So it would really be interesting to have a conversation with him about his childhood, his teenage years, and how he got out of these shadow aspects or these challenges, because it is also defined by his Chiron. So it is for sure a childhood wound that was there, and it was something that was poked on, and also he seemed to have been beaten up by his peers when he was younger. So it was for sure something that he had to go through, to move through, and in order to come out on the other side to provide really helpful solutions and insights into how to make something work better. And I'm sure his clients are very happy about his skills now in order to help them move on, move past it. And yeah.
Since we did touch on touch in these 2 gates, I think it is really important to note that if you guys have watched him, he will sometimes ask for an object that people have brought. He'll maybe touch it for like 2 seconds, but he doesn't really need to touch the object of someone else, which I think is really interesting. Like sometimes he'll like really get a wave of something from someone, but oftentimes he doesn't have to touch the physical object. It's more about like the scribbling piece of it and being in like the vicinity of people. So I think that that's really interesting rather than having to like lay your hands upon them kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, additionally, as you said, the closer he gets, the more he receives the information. So it's still linked to physically being in a place or physically being in proximity to someone, thankfully, I would say. And I'm assuming that's why he bought a secluded cabin in the woods somewhere in order to not have these many influences bombarding him. But he also says that his partner sometimes there are situations where he just randomly receives these insights and then he just has to share them. And his partner thankfully understands. I mean, they've been together for 8 years, so great to have someone that is so open-minded and understanding of just randomly having insights from the other side come through. Not everyone is able to do that, I would say. The last gate I think we can touch on is gate 22. We've covered gate 61 quite a bit now with his conscious sun and Neptune, unconscious and conscious, and some asteroids. But gate 22 for me is always a very intriguing gate because the highest expression is grace. And I find, well, I actually, now that I say it, I'm not sure if it's the highest expression, if it's the siddhi, or if it's just the gift aspect of the gate, but it has this grace aspect about it if you're stepping out of your shadow. And I think that he has a lot of grace. When you're hearing him talk, when you're seeing him, he just has this graceful way of going about things. And I think this comes along with the humility and being so humble about his gifts. And yeah, I think it's a combination of qualities. But this provides him the ability to explain things in a way that his clients can connect with as well. He's very graceful, he's very clear, he's logical in his approach, he's caring, as you've mentioned with gate 50. So yeah, all of these are a great mix to have.
I think the big note with anything coming out of the emotional center is listening to the emotional wave, right? And this harks back on timing, being in tune with the ups, the downs, the calm and the clear of the emotional wave. And being able to not only tap into your own, but know when you are open and ready to receive in that wave as well. So I feel like that's another learning process that as a 3-line, Tyler probably also really had to overcome as well.
Yeah, he was mentioning that the only way of really knowing yourself is through understanding your emotional spectrum. And I thought that was, when I saw his chart, I thought that was very funny that he said that, because he is an emotional being. He's a collective wave, or he's defined through a collective wave. And so he's very impacted by the happenings in the collective. And I just thought that it was very interesting that he gets to know himself through the emotions, and also by like he loves Carl Gustav Jung. He loves to learn about the psychological theories that he provided, and also shadow aspects of some other individuals that he mentioned, the hero's journey, and it's very interesting.
I love when an emotional person can be like, oh, aren't we all just so emotional? Or like when a sacral-centered person is all just like, just trust your gut. You know, I love that you're in tune with that. I've never felt it, but I love that you're in tune with it, and you can have an emotional wave and experience that and trust your gut, you know? So it's really cool when people can experience what they're here to experience in their design, you know? Thanks for sharing those insights, Tyler Henry, about your emotional waves.
Yeah, so I thought that was a very fascinating episode regarding looking at the human design chart from a bit of a different perspective, a bit of a woo perspective for some people. We like it. I think that concludes the episode, unless you have another thing you would like to add.
Alrighty, guys. If you want to look more into your chart, someone else's chart for these higher intuitive functions, screenshot this now so that you can look into it as well. I'm not going to say all of them out loud. If you're watching on a podcast, please go watch on YouTube and just screenshot this there. We really greatly appreciate it. So hopefully you guys like this episode too. This was literally just like on a whim, being like, I think that there's something to it, and dig a little bit deeper, and there definitely is something to it. So thanks for hanging out with us, and Miko, amazing insights as per usual.
You too. Well done.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Ciao.